And thank you everybody for listening while you're having your lunch. My younger son goes to NYU. He's in 4th year. He never signed up for the meal plan after the first semester, so I hope this lunch is good. So enjoy that. I'm going to shift gears a little bit from this morning. I'm going to talk about wearable tech as it applies to sports. We had a lot of good conversation this morning about how it applies to fitness, health, well-being, medical applications, and this is going to be more about sports, kind of a little bit more on the active side, but I'll talk more about what Adidas is doing in there, and particularly about how I've seen the wearable tech more in the sports or smart textile part evolve over the last years. So wearable tech can mean different things to different people. I remember about 10 years ago, one of the wearable tech thing was having a laptop secured on the back or on the front and carrying that all over the place. And it has come a long way since then, where wearable tech is getting more and more ubiquitous. And we've seen some of the examples this morning. We'll see probably more examples this afternoon. And I think it has evolved a long way since we also first started ourselves. I'll tell you a little bit about our history. Before we were part of Adidas, some of us started working on smart textiles or e-textiles when we were part of DuPont in the DuPont textile business, and then there DuPont was looking at providing more functionality into textiles. So textiles is one thing that we actually use very well in our daily lives, right? We wear them, we sleep on them, we sit on them, we walk on them. And so if we could make those much more functional, that would be really valuable. That's where the whole concept of e-textiles or smart textiles started, at least for us. This was in the early 2000s. It has evolved a bit since then. We have moved on since then. We left DuPont. We started an e-textile company called Textronics. And Textronics took these e-textile technologies and embedded into different applications. At that time, we were looking at all different applications, including medical, including military, first responder, particularly military and first responder were very active at that time, and there was a lot of funding and there was a lot of interest in there. Medical always used to be the holy grail in terms of how we could use that for the health and well-being, but it does have a pretty long runway. So from our standpoint, we started looking at that, but then we diverted a little bit in terms of our technology, and instead of just doing e-textile technology, we actually started building the technology into apparel for sports application. We knew a little bit about sports, and it is also a little bit easier with less barrier to entry into sports. So the first smart textile apparel for consumer we launched in 2005. And that was a sports bra which had the textile sensors built into it that could monitor your heart rate. Now, this morning, Sunny talked about Wearable 2.0, which is whatever you use, you try and embed in that. So that is actually what we did at that time. We looked at the most desirable sports bra available and used that as the basis and embedded technology in there, which is our textile sensors. And it was very comfortable, very easy to use, washable. You use it as many times as you want. In fact, when we launched it, there are people who are not aware of that sports bra, and people would use that sports bra for the sports bra as opposed to for the technology if they did not want it. So that is how easy it was. And that obviously attracted a lot of interest for us, as well as interest from Adidas. And then Adidas being very interested in that, that is when we became part of Adidas in 2008. And since then, our focus has been bringing smart textile technology or wearable technology into sports with Adidas. And we are a small group based out of outside of Philadelphia. A couple of my colleagues are here, Brian and Bryce. We are particularly chartered to develop wearable tech for sports, integration of electronics and textiles together. And this is where we do all the R&D for sort of next generation wearable tech to come for sports. So within Adidas, I'll talk a little bit about some of the wearable tech that's already out there. Some of that you might be familiar of. Some are coming out in the very near future. And they are mostly for a little bit more active sports, and it's gone pretty good reception so far. What I'm going to actually focus more on my talk on is the Micoach Elite Team System. So evolving from sports for consumers or for individual sports, we have been in the process of building a system that the whole team can use, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about that next. And with Adidas and Micoach, it's all about making the athlete stronger, faster, smarter, and now using wearable tech and the electronics and all the data and all the analysis to make it really smart. Here's a video clip that gives you a little bit overview of the technology itself. How about if you take that out? Maybe that'll be enough. That's better? Sounded better.
Yeah, I don't know why it's doing that popping noise.
How about if you take that off? You can just put it on the microphone there.
Okay.
This might be the problem.
That could have been it.
Right?
You want to try the headphone again, or?
I did not want to miss the music part of it, so make sure. Okay. So that's the Micoach Elite Team System. And the whole system is designed so that all the players can wear this wearable tech smart shirt, which has the sensors embedded into it, an electronic device which then communicates with the base. And the main thing about this whole system is to make sure that it is very simple and easy to use for all the players, otherwise they're not going to wear that. And give them the relevant information, particularly the coach or the trainer or the somebody on the sidelines who has the ability to take a look at all the information coming on real time and then be able to make some judgments, some decisions about it. The tool was initially designed more for training, but it's going to be evolving into being able to use for game as well. And as I mentioned about the data, so there's a whole bunch of different sensors embedded into, including different inertial sensors, gyroscope, magnetometer, and you name it, which collects a lot of data. And when we were out there talking to all these coaches in terms of what they want, one thing they did not want is another ream full of pages with a lot of data because they cannot deal with it. So the key was to take all of this data and synthesize that into very relevant, useful information that they can then use very quickly and be able to act on it. And what we did is, like, in addition to getting some basic metrics like the speed, the distance, we also were able to look at all of that information, including the cardio information, including the physiological information, and combine them into so that we can give some more relevant, powerful new metrics. For example, power. Power is a new metric that Adidas created, which gives the total power that an athlete is putting out on the field. And then as a result of that power, and then you can also measure the total cost to the athlete for that power by his cardio output, and you can measure the efficiency of the athlete. So what was very important is, like, in addition to the system and the data, the analysis that goes with it. Here are the different components of that system. So on the left is the TechFit shirt. That is the wearable part. That is where we started out with these smart textiles. It has the sensors embedded into it. It has a small player cell that goes at the back of the pocket, which then communicates to the base station, and then you can see all this information live on an iPad. My colleagues here have some samples of the shirt and the player cells. So if you want to come up and touch and feel it, you're welcome to do that. So as I just explained, it all happens real time on the field. All the team players are wearing that smart shirt. Communication from the smart shirt to the base station, and then the base station displays this live information on a dashboard. The user interface in this case is an iPad. Once you are done with the whole game or the training, you can then upload all of that information to the web, and then you have the ability to see this information on the web, or anybody who's access to that can see that information on the web. Not only just for that particular day's training, but then you can look at historical data as well. You can track it, how a player or an athlete is doing over time. And then particularly you can start looking at what kind of information is needed for the coach to deal with game minus 1 day, game minus 2 day, and so on. So this system was actually launched last December. By the time it started getting used by the teams, we now have all the 19 MLS teams in the US using the system, and we have some select Adidas teams in Europe using the system. And we continue to expand the usage of the system in soccer. Most of the key European soccer teams and federations that are associated with Adidas will have the system over the next few months to next year. Then we are also looking at expanding this technology to other sports, as well as expanding this technology beyond the elite teams to the amateur teams as well. I'll talk a little bit about the TechFit shirt itself, since this is more of a wearable tech conference and more to smart shirts. So that smart shirt, again, was designed using the proprietary sensor technology that Adidas has as a result of acquiring Textronics. And there again, what we did was we looked at the shirts that the players are currently wearing or we would like to wear, and then use that as a base to embed the sensors in there. We did do a lot of work asking all the teams and the players and testing it out with them to make sure that it is comfortable, it's easy to use, and also particularly the device that goes at the back to make sure that is the right place for that, as well as it does not obstruct them in any way, any movement, or bring any issues in terms of safety or security of any of the players. You can see that guy in the middle is so happy wearing the TechFit shirt. So a couple of do's and don'ts from our side. What was very important in this system, particularly because it was being developed for the elite teams, and they obviously want to have the best. Performance is key, so you could not sacrifice a whole lot on performance. Having said that, it had to look pretty cool too. Otherwise, these guys are not going to wear. They're not going to wear anything that would resemble like a sports bra or any of those things, right? It had to look very nice, cool. And as you know, I mean, depending upon how the game goes, they have the thing of throwing the jerseys off, showing what's under layer, and it has to look good as well. So we had to make sure that we met the design criteria as well as the performance criteria with that. The other thing is, like, since it's going into, it's not for, at least this one is not for the consumer application, it's going to a team application where there's somebody else who actually takes care of the equipment. It is important to satisfy the needs of the athlete, the coach, as well as the equipment manager who handles all of this thing to make sure it's taken care of well and it is used properly. And then obviously cannot develop the electronics in vacuum versus the textile, so it has to go together, and that has been actually a key for us. where when we were Textronics and now in Adidas, we have sort of the right group of people working together on the electronic side and on the textile side. So there are a lot of things that you can actually do by working together. There are certain problems or issues that you can solve by working together as opposed to just by electronics or by textiles. And that has been a sort of one of the key learnings for us as well. Then the other thing was, like, while you're bringing it all together, you have to make sure that it is fit for use. Fit for use also includes not providing a whole lot more than what is needed at the expense of either ease of use and or comfort. For example, we also have respiration technology. We had the opportunity to put respiration technology in there. We chose not to because that would make the garment at that time not as comfortable and easy to use. Plus, more importantly, we wanted to make sure that when we do use that, we have the ability to communicate the value that it brings as opposed to, yeah, you're breathing, or you're breathing fast, or you're breathing slow. What does that mean? So it had to sort of match for that fit for use. So even all the work that we've done with all the sensors and the data, the important thing is the information that comes out is very critical and easy and relevant to use for the coach. Otherwise, if there's a lot of information, then none of that is going to be used. The last one, testing, and we continue to do that all along. So that's been a key thing for us. And as I mentioned, is like this, so it's about wearable tech, but it's like kind of like a mini ecosystem by itself. And we heard how important ecosystem is going to be going forward. We also noticed that this wearable tech actually enables a lot of things. Right now, it was designed mainly for training in terms of helping athletes get better. As it evolves and as it goes from training to in-game, there's a huge opportunity for fan engagement. And that is actually what's probably going to drive that further. There's also a huge opportunity beyond soccer into other sports. And then there is a huge opportunity beyond the elite going into the amateur level as well. So what's next? I mean, these are the things that is happening within Adidas in terms of how we bring wearable tech for elite athletes, as well as how do we bring wearable tech for consumers. There have been some devices that are already out there by Adidas, and there are a lot of other devices out there. This map actually shows sort of a way of looking at how this whole field of wearable tech is evolving, right? And this goes, the way it is from left to right, it is high performance to more lifestyle, more wellness, more fitness. And from top to bottom in terms of price points, lower price points, all the way to higher price points. And if you see this map, there is a lot of devices spread all over the place. There are some devices that have been there for a long period of time, and there are some that are populating much faster. We've heard about quite a few this morning. I think we're going to see a lot more of them this evening. And the key is, like, there was this research that was just conducted recently, a market research, which shows that this whole space continues to grow pretty well. Within that space, the bottom right space, particularly on the fitness, wellness side, actually is growing much more faster. So we heard the number this morning about the possibility of this being a $50 billion market. We love it. I'm assuming the whole crowd here loves that number. And we hope that that continues to grow. And we want to also play an important part in that. We have some very key technologies. We want to look at the partnership with a lot of people in here, because as somebody else mentioned earlier, is like, as an individual, as an athlete, as a consumer, you're going to continue to evolve in terms of how you use these devices. You ideally want a device or an apparel or something like that that goes through what you normally do. During the whole day, if you're doing more in terms of all-day activity monitoring, some of us may want to have something that you can clip on. Some of us may want to have something that you wear on. Some of that you may want something that you go against the wristband. So I believe there's opportunity for all these different form factors in there. It would be great if all these form factors and all these devices somehow work together, so that from a consumer perspective, it becomes very seamless, and no matter what activity you're doing, where you are continuously being tracked and helped to improve whatever you're trying to improve. With that, I'll be happy to take any questions. There are some samples, and you'll see a little bit of this thing in this evening's demo as well. Yes, please.
You mentioned about expanding into the amateur teams, but are you also planning to get into the whole wellness and chronic population for which the same metric seems very intuitive and relevant?
Yeah, that is true. So this system for us is sort of at the spear, right? It's the pinnacle of it. The intent is to bring this technology down as further as possible. So there's a huge opportunity within the wide population that a lot of these metrics and these sensor technologies would be applicable there as well.
What does a typical system cost?
So a typical system costs, depending upon the components of the system that are being used, as well as the relationship of the team with Adidas. But that's not what you're looking for, right? You're looking for dollar numbers, right? Okay. Right. So Adidas has consumer devices as well as these professional devices. So the consumer devices are anywhere from sub $100 to $200 to $300 range, depending upon the functionality of these. The Micoach Elite Team system that we just introduced, it's the overall value of that is somewhere in the $100,000, €100,000 range. And it obviously depends upon how many teams, how many players, and the relationship with that. All the way to the back, yeah.
Does the law of the game allow using such technology?
A good question. So for soccer, FIFA does not allow technology that can have bidirectional communication during the game. However, the MLS in the US does not necessarily follow the whole FIFA regulations, right? So depending upon the league that you are in, right, and your relationship with FIFA, you have the ability to use the technology in game. And then as you move from soccer to other games, there are different regulations by other games as well in terms of use of technology. So as of now, I mean, there are certain MLS teams who are actually using that in game. You can probably use that in exhibition games and things like that, but for a FIFA game, the bi-directional communication is not allowed. Yes?
Why do you have the base station in there? Why not go directly to the iPad?
Yeah, that's a good question. The iPad was meant more for a user interface and a very simple and easy and elegant user interface. And when we actually first started showing the system out, we actually first brought this thing out at the MLS All-Star game last year. And before that, when you're looking at it, an iPad was new at that time, so that was about as slick as the shirt that we spent a whole lot of time and effort in, right? But it needs a certain amount of processing power, as well as storage, as well as the communication that you need the base to do all of that for you. And the base also is the place where all the player cells go into it, where they get charged, where they get downloaded, where they get uploaded to that. The base station is about a couple of feet wide by about 2 or 3 feet tall. It's like a small suitcase. It's like on wheels, so you can carry that on and off. It has its own power system, so mostly in outdoor soccer, if you don't have power, that doesn't matter. You just drag it on, use it, and take it back.
What's the RF that you're using?
So the RF we use 5.4 gigahertz and 2.4 gigahertz with a proprietary protocol.
And then the next question is, if you're willing to answer this, what was the hardest thing about doing this? What's the biggest barrier to entry?
So I'll tell you, before we were Adidas, we were Textronics. We were trying to do the same thing again. And having Adidas as the brand behind it made life a lot more easier. And yeah, so I mean, from a technology standpoint, most of the components of the technology are there. So you need to just put it together, and you need to put it together in a way that sort of we use best of the design, that people actually love to use it as opposed to have to use it because they've been told, and then compliance goes down. And then the second and the important part of that was making sure that you put the right sensors in the right package and make it easy and comfortable to use. And then the most important part actually was, with all these sensors, you get a lot of data. right? Nobody wants more data. They want very relevant, useful, very simple, easy to use information. And that actually was one of the keys. So there were like 2 or 3 factors that kind of all come together. Is
soccer just the reason you've adopted this for soccer because it's your favorite sport, or what are some of the challenges to some of my favorite sports like football and tennis, for example?
Yeah. So my favorite sport is also football. When we were actually Textronics, at that time, before the Adidas Association, we were working on a system with Reebok, who actually at that time had the NFL sponsorship for NFL. So we actually did some prototypes for NFL, and that is the direction we were moving in. And there are a couple of things that happened at that time. One is Adidas acquired us as Textronics. Soccer globally is the bigger game with the bigger audience, as well as the relationship issues that were evolving within Adidas and NFL, so that's how we focused to soccer. But it is not limited to soccer. I mean, we are looking at other sports as well, including football and most of the outdoor sports. This does use GPS technology for speed and distance, so it's more meant for outdoors. We're looking at other technologies for indoor applications as well.
Okay, what would be an example of other technologies you're looking at the 10,000-foot level? For example, for basketball.
For basketball. So for basketball, a lot of this thing is relevant, right? But there are 2 or 3 challenges. One is because you move indoors, GPS does not move, so you need to get the right technology for supplementing GPS. So there's a whole lot of work going on in terms of looking at the right technology that you can supplement GPS with, which is available, except you want to still make sure that it's easy to use, it is very portable, people don't have to have a lot of huge infrastructure costs for that. So those are some of the barriers and challenges that we have to solve. And then even as you move from one sport to the other, a lot of that remains common in terms of data, but that the information that you have to synthesize out of the data, that changes as well, right? So things for basketball, for a coach, would be slightly different than what is needed for soccer. Soccer, you've got a big pitch. They all want to know how much you ran, how fast you ran. That becomes a little bit less relevant in basketball. But then there are other metrics that starts with basketball. And we actually use the same process that we use for soccer by talking to the teams, understanding what the needs are. And some of them are very good in articulating exactly what the need is. And some of them may think what they want, but we need to sort of work through the process to make sure we understand what is needed.
Have you combined this with any camera-based systems, so like things using actual visual tracking to correlate the data from the GPS?
Yeah, so we ourselves have not done that. We have used those technologies and some other technology to validate our technology. But other people who actually have a camera-based system have the ability to do that.
And how many teams are using this in-game?
I don't have the exact count, but the MLS teams are using that in-game. Yes, right here.
So how are you dealing with batteries in the fact recharging them and the fact that you got to wash the shirts and all that?
Yeah, so actually, I have a sample of the shirt right here. So this player cell at the back, it actually comes out. Right? And then it goes into the base. Right? And when it goes into the base, it downloads the data as well as recharges it. And that's all you need. And once that's done, when the player uses it, it goes back in the pocket and stays there. And this evening session, I think you'll be able to see the base station. So you'll see how that goes. That's where it gets charged. So this thing holds a charge for like an 8-hour charge, right? So that if the team is having 2 training sessions in the day, they can do that. It also has storage, so it can store. So if the team is traveling somewhere, they don't have the base with them, they can actually still continue to store data on that. And when they come back, then they can download the data.
There's an issue with, among young athletes that suffer heart failure. And have you looked into the application of this in that market?
Well, so that's a very difficult question. I mean, we don't call this as a medical device, and we don't say that it's going to sort of cure or track anything. It does have data that the coach or the trainer or the strength and conditioning coach or the athletic trainer can use and make use of that information, how we have that. We actually faced the same question or the potential for the challenge when we went to, when we were doing it for American football and NFL. And you guys are most familiar with the Corey Stringer case at that time, and there was, can this be sort of the medical device to use? And not from our side. It's not a medical device. The sensors that we use, and I forgot to mention in one of the slides, when we first brought it out for consumer applications, we actually, and we were looking at medical applications at that time as well. So the sensors that we developed, we had actually put that through the FDA 510K, and we showed that they were substantially equivalent to the sticky electrodes that you use in medical. So the sensors were good for medical quality information. At the back there.
Does it broadcast the data live from the field during gameplay? Or is it only after the fact where it's placed physically into the dock?
So you see live data that goes from the player cell to the base on your iPad. So on your iPad, you're seeing live real-time data, and for in less than a second of what's happening on the field.
Can you please address user privacy, and were people willing to take this on? It seems to me as a player, I wouldn't want to be measured in this way against my peer person.
Yeah, so that actually varies a lot by team and by league, right? And so we actually have nothing to do with that part of the data. Each and every team makes a decision in terms of how they manage the data. I mean, wherever the player unions are very active, there is ongoing conversation and discussion going on there. But that is different by team and by league, and that's how that we manage. The thing though is like, but I'll talk to you about all the teams that we have sold it to or given it to so far. They are all using it, and they are all using the data for themselves in terms of if and when they want to use that data for fan engagement. That's another separate question in terms of how they're going to deal with that.
You say about the innovation on the textile part of the product?
Oh, yeah, sure. I'd love to talk about the innovation on the textile side of the product, because that's where we started out to be. So more on the textile sensors part of that, right? I mentioned a little bit about some of us coming from the DuPont side, where in the fiber or fabric business. And DuPont was actually pretty good in terms of evolving from what was cotton at one time to polyester with functionality, nylon with more functionality, and lycra with more functionality. And that is what it evolved in terms of looking at what's the next level of functionality that we can bring into textiles, right? So that's the mindset we came up with. So we looked at a lot of different technologies in terms of fibers, in terms of yarn, and also in terms of integrating that into apparel. And the key technology that is being used in here in terms of developing these sensors, so that's like a knit-in textile electrode technology that we have patents for, where you actually put these sensors right into the garment. So it's not like added on or pasted on, something like that. And then as a result of that, the sports bra that I showed you that has those sensor technology built into it, so the wearer does not feel anything different. It's like the same or very similar fibers or yarn touching your body, and it's like about as simple and easy to use as possible. It goes through the regular washing cycle as if you were handling any normal clothes. So the question is, why don't we have more of that in all of our wardrobes? Yes? Well, that's the question I asked, right? So the thing though is like, I mean, as I showed you in one of the previous maps, like if we had drawn that same picture about 2005 when we launched the sports bra, that was very open, right? There was like hardly a few things that were up there, right? And we, at that time, being a small company, did not have the wherewithal in terms of bringing the technology out and explaining to that. And then there are, like somebody mentioned about the retail distribution channels, right? And that's actually very complex. We had that sports bra, which had an electronic component and a textile component. And any retailer that you go to, there's a separate electronics buyer and there's a separate apparel buyer. Believe it or not, they don't talk to each other. And they have their own separate open budgets, right? They have their own retail shelf space. And those are all the challenges that we face at that time, right? Now, having sort of evolved from them, I personally believe that it is going to continue to happen. It's going to go much faster. There are devices, as you know, that you can just clip on, which I think great. But there are also devices that are going to come which are embedded into the apparel and or as unobtrusive as it can get, because we do wear apparel all the time and we use clothing. So if it is embedded into that, that's beautiful. You don't even know that, you have that. Yeah, I had one slide in there. So Adidas has a number of devices for consumers. It's about 4 or 5 years ago, we first launched the Adidas Pacer and Adidas Zone devices. So they were all measuring heart rate and activity and reporting to that. And you, in addition to just measuring that, the Adidas Micoach, the key there is like it was also coaching you. So the first time that you get that device, if you put your base information in there about your base heart rate, about your weight and age and all that, and also what your goals are. I mean, if your goal is to run a marathon, or if your goal is to just stay fit, or if your goal is to lose weight, then based on that, it actually gave you a prescription for training for the whole week or for the whole month. And as you progressed, depending upon your performance, it would update that. So it was like a dynamic coaching engine. And so Adidas then, since then, have also introduced a speed cell that goes in your shoe. So you don't have to wear it anywhere, it's just part of the shoe. And that does the same thing. And in a very short order, it is going to come out with another consumer device that actually does more of that, which is, I will not say a whole lot about it until it comes out. Yes?
So you mentioned that one of the really important parts was the data analysis and being able to break that data.
Yes.
And then you also mentioned next breath that because of privacy, you're not looking at any of the data coming off of your system. So how do you develop these algorithms?
Oh, okay, so good point. But the two separate things, right? As we were developing that, like, I mean, we actually work with a number of teams, right? And we actually have players that we've signed up with where we have access to their data, right? And so we get all of their data, we look at the data, and that's how we develop all the analysis, all the algorithms that go behind the analysis. And then once we've validated those, that becomes part of the package that the teams get. And then once the team gets, they get the raw data if they want to, and they get the analysis, right? And they have the ability to choose if for some reason they want to do their own analysis, which is different from us, that's fine, they're welcome to do that. If they want to use our analysis, we tell them what the analysis is. If they want to modify that, we also give them ability to do that. Yes. Yeah, so one of the things that we give in there is like power and power thresholds, and then we also give some kind of a cardio threshold. So what the trainer has is the ability to do is going into any training, if they want to have light training because they're just coming off a game, right? Or they're going into a game and they don't want to train heavily, or vice versa. You can set some very specific numbers in there, right? And then on a real-time basis, the trainer will know how you are approaching that threshold. And then the trainer or the coach has the ability to change your routine or stop you once you've reached the threshold, or let you keep going. But those are the decisions that the trainer does. The trainer does that today even without some of the technology, mainly because they use their ability and the knowledge. This now gives them actually some real data to go behind. Yes, please.
You mentioned earlier no one needs more data, they need more action. I need to make more of it. But you and I could be the exact same height, weight, BMI, and we're running the exact same speed next to each other. My heart rate's 130 versus 140. That's just the difference between the way that we're made up.
Right.
How does this calculate for that? Because now you're determining power in some way. I'm assuming that power is an outcome of
Yeah.
cardio divided by time divided by speed. But if we just have different makeups in the first place, this is really
Okay, that's an excellent question. First of all, I should have never said that they never want more data, because there are obviously people who does. Most of them actually want synthesis of data, but there are people who actually want all the data as well. But to answer your question, what we do in this particular, just from a heart rate perspective, so there is already the max heart rate inputted in there, and yours would be different than mine, right? And then we also report it as relative heart rate, right? And so on a relative scale, right, you are in the red zone, or you are 80% of max, and so am I, right? But our numbers are different. So the coach can look at that. Particularly for power. So what we have is, like, we have some exercise design so that for the first time, the athlete, we can find out what is the athlete's threshold power, right? And your threshold power will be different than my threshold power, right? But then we also report it as relative power, relative to your threshold. So then it becomes a base, like common base for everybody, and particularly for the coach to look at. Does that answer your question?
It does. I just wonder if it becomes now something that people, if they're having a hard time deciding between, all right, I got a right wing, I have two guys on the same spot. The data's telling me this guy has more power than this guy. Does that become something?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I would say it's like a good indicator, better than not having any. Is it perfect? Probably over the period of time it will get there. And then will the coach use this thing the way it is? Most likely not. I mean, they will get to a point where they're totally comfortable with it. What I've done is, like, behavior-wise, being on the field sometimes with these coaches, like, they use their gut, to be honest, in terms of what's happening on the field, right? But once in a while they come and say, what does the iPad show? Oh, okay, so it's kind of matching what I'm thinking, right? And I think that is how the process is going to go until they get more comfortable about it, right? And that's when they really start making decisions based on numbers, if it gets to that point. Otherwise, it's going to be sort of a good place for them to, this is what I think, this is what the data is showing, yes, it is matching, or it is not matching, let's just look at it in more details.
Clearly, this is on-field training technology. Is there anything on the roadmap for off-field training as far as to round out and complete the training package in the sense of sleep monitoring, sleep proficiency, or similar aspects of training in that respect?
So particularly around sleep, there are actually devices out there that do sleep monitoring. Our devices at this time does not do that, but that's something that we can add as a capability. In terms of off-field, so some of the other Adidas Micoach devices, like the Pacer, like the Speed Cell, that actually can be used for off-field, right? And you go, you do that. Once you're done with that, all the data gets synced up to the web, and then you have all that information on the web to do that. This system also has the ability to doing off-sync, so if you do not want real time, you can actually start the session and everything with the player cell, and then you can ignore the real time, you can go do whatever you want. Once you are away from the system, that device actually is capturing all this data also. And once you get back in, then you can plug that back in.